Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes with Vishal. It's going to be a great episode today about AI and how AI is revolutionizing cybersecurity. So stay tuned, and we're going to get started in about 4 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're very lucky today. We have a great guest again for this week with Vishal joining us from Microsoft Federal. We're going to be talking about AI and how AI is revolutionizing cybersecurity. Is that real? Is that just buzzwords like blockchain, or what is going to happen? Let's find out today. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everybody to subscribe to the show, go to inthenickoftime.tv, and you'll get an email a week to notify you of the next episodes. You'll see we're going to get some pretty cool discussions in the next couple of months. Next week, we're going to be discussing cyber offense and cyber warfare. So it's going to be a very interesting dialogue with someone with a very huge expertise in cyber offense, including when he comes to defending and attacking assets that are not traditional IT assets like jets and bombers and space systems. So that's going to be an interesting conversation next week. So stay tuned. Next Tuesday, 1 p.m., we're going to be announcing that at the end of the show. Also, if you've not tried yet Sage, reminding you to give it a shot. Go on sage.ai. We have now over 3,000 teams on Sage across pretty much every agency and many NATO partners. Over 1,600 in the Air Force and Space Force. Pretty amazing to see all the different use cases. We're releasing actually this week a pretty amazing plugin that's effectively scanning your Git repo and looking at every file that's code in there and looking at optimizations, performance optimizations, but also security improvements and any kind of improvement when it comes to performance and so on. And so that's going to then create a PR or merge request in your Git repo to give you all the changes for you to review automatically and seamlessly. So the body is able to pull the code, scan the code, analyze the code, give the proposed code back, and then create the PR into your Git repo. So pretty amazing stuff. A lot of amazing plugins we release in the next few weeks, and go check it out on sage.ai. Obviously, we can do all the way to CUI. We have a full ATO evidence package for teams to use, and the DoD is working on a DoD-wide ATO, but in the meantime, every local AO can send an IATT for you guys to use it with the package we have. So check it out and reach out to us if you have any questions. It's pretty amazing stuff. I don't Google anymore. That's all I do. So it's pretty cool stuff. Really improving my time probably by 70 to 80%, which is pretty mind-boggling. So with that, wanted to welcome in a few seconds our new guest, Vishal, joining us. He's a presidential scholar and GM of the Microsoft Federal Defense Security Compliance and Identity business. That's a lot of things. So we're going to talk today about what that means and what that really entail when it comes to balancing, cyber compliance and outcomes. Of course, his career path spans from the DoD through the civilian sector. He's a recognized leader, technical specialist, and cyber thought leader, building, shaping industry partnerships to better connect both the private and the public sector. He has a distinguished military service, and we thank him for his service as he joined as an aviator in the F-18 fighter community and within the Joint Special Ops community supporting national security mission globally. Is currently serving on cybersecurity advisory councils and philanthropic boards, and continues to invest in driving diversity within cybersecurity, empowering those who selfishly serve their communities and our nation. So we couldn't dream of a better guest, someone that not only gets his hand dirty and actually does a real job of war fighting, unlike me, and someone that also is technical and understand the deep dive of the complexity of implementing the tech in this construct of war fighting and bring the two worlds together to actually get to tangible outcomes for the war fighter. And when I talk to Vishal, really what always comes back is focus on making sure that we're giving the right tools and the right capabilities to the warfighter. So that's been pretty mind-boggling for me to listen to. So I hope you're going to be pretty excited to ask him your questions, and start with a Q on the comment chat below to tell us if you have a question for him. And with that, let's bring him up on the screen. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. I don't know
I'm so
if
excited.
yeah, I don't know if you're excited or I am more excited. I was just listening to one of the previous shows to kind of remind myself of the format and everything you're going. And what stuck out to me was, I think on the last one, it was only a week ago, you had 2,500 teams, right? And
That's right. That
it's
flies.
oh man, it's growing exponentially of how many folks are investing in what we're going to be talking about today. So it's awesome. So Nic, thank you for having me, and I really do appreciate it.
No, for sure. Yeah, we're getting. We used to get 30 to 60 a day, and now we're beating every day pretty much on the weekdays, 100 to 140, which is pretty insane, I think, and it's all word of mouth, so it's pretty amazing. Not as much on the gov side and the civilian side, so we're hopeful that more people are gonna start engaging. Saving time is just so important when it comes to automation, and we'll talk about that today. Before we get started, I try to give a good understanding to the people listening who you are, but no one can do it as good as what you described to me. So over to you
Sure.
to give us your journey.
Sure. I mean, I think this is one of my favorite topics to start with and talk about, Nic, um, specifically because it's very non-traditional. I think most of the folks in our space come from a defense background or come from a background where you serve. My background's unique, and I shared this last week during RSA, which was insane. And for those of you who were at RSA, you know that you could have put any word in front of a sentence and said .ai on the back of it, and that was all the buzz that was happening last week. And when I thought about my journey as someone in the service, I reflected on opportunity and really the ability to really invest back in what we're doing here in this country. My family, Nic, immigrated here from Uganda, from refuge in Uganda, and my father, my grandfather, was exiled by the Idi Amin era, and I'm a first generation American. We come from many kids in the family, right? Many of which are doctors and dentists and lawyers and very professional individuals. I actually rode my bike down to the Marine Corps enlistment office back in the 97, 98 timeframe right there. And I accidentally enlisted in the Marine Corps because I had no backbone to say no. So I walked my bike back home that day and told my mother. And my father said something very revealing that day, because I was only 17. And Nic, he said, in our family, when we make a commitment to something, we do it. So, we signed the enlistment papers, went back, and next thing you know, I was in the, Marine Corps. I was a military policeman. I made the conscious decision to put myself out there, and September 11th happened, and we deployed, we went overseas, we came back, and I made that decision again to put myself out there, my data, my name, my actions, those types of things. I decided to commission, in 2004, 2005, and I commissioned into the Marine Corps on the aviation side. I was fortunate enough, like you mentioned, to get into the aviation community and got to fly what I like to say a very innovative platform, which was the F-18 Hornet, which I had no clue had so much data passing through it to be able to achieve what it was meant to achieve. And commissioning, flying the Hornet, going out and serving in the Asian regions. I think my first deployment in the Hornet was on the Eastern Pacific side in the Koreas, where we did a lot of data collection, and we had sensors like ATARs and other sensors on the jet, where we took real-time data and tried to take that data and move it into the warfighter's hands in real time to mitigate high valued assets and threats, so that they can go out and fight the war or go conduct their missions or operations. From there, I came back. I became a subject matter expert in weapon systems and other things. And and from that moment, I learned this thing called ATARs, which was this platform within the Hornet, which replaced the gun for a data platform. So I think a lot of individuals don't realize that this jet wasn't just created to go drop bombs and shoot down other planes, and it's not, as glorious as maybe Top Gun Maverick or some of those other things, but they actually took the physical weapon system out of the pointy nose of the jet, and they put a data collection, device or endpoint, for lack of better terms, in there. And that device was used to collect data and telemetry to be able to gather and send back to Central Command to do some of that work. I learned that system in and out. It was an amazing experience. The next deployment over to the South Pacific, and then even back into the Pacific region, right? South China Sea was a big deal. We didn't realize, everything that was going on with Taiwan, South China Sea, and all of the buildup there. But our focus was still in the Middle East and in Central Command. Came back from that deployment, and after doing a lot of these ATARS missions and being able to consolidate kind of who I was, my identity, I made that decision to go back on the ground and get my boots dirty. And I went over to a physical battalion, a 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and then I worked with JSOC on the back end of that with an organization called Marine Corps Special Operations Command as well. And I started having the ability to call in airstrikes and call in and coordinate aircraft in the air real time. The funny thing, Nick, was at this moment of my career, I was taking the data that I was utilizing, or that I was working on the mission side in the Hornet, and I was utilizing that same data in these tablets and these systems to actually kinetically achieve a mission in the Middle East, where we were coordinating aircraft, dropping ordnance, working on air support, things of that nature. And it never once occurred to me, years prior, that everything kinetic was based on that data, and I was associated with it. I mean, just prior to that, I was in Qatar, where you were in that big screen and the big room with the IMAX movie theater, and though there's kinetic pieces happening all around you, and there's UAVs all over the world, everything is up on the screen, and everything is just a sensor, and everything is just bringing in that data. And for me, as a, at the time, I was a major before, and I retired a couple of years later, and I'll tell you why. For me, it was about the warfighter. It was about being kinetic. But it wasn't until that moment where I was reliant on the data, and I was reliant on the transparency and really the honesty of the data, that I was tied to it. I was glued to it. And I realized that no matter what I did physically, that data had to be secure, it had to be derived the right way, it had to be validated. And there was an operation in 2014 of December. I was on the Macon Island, and it was a very data-centric operation of a rescue or a recovery of 2 individuals. And this is where I got into cybersecurity. So my background here and my journey into this is, so far, there's no cyber in my background. There was no data. There was nothing. I was married by that point. I had 2 kids. I missed a birth of my first 2, and I've got 3 now. And I was coming home from that deployment. I'd met my son for the first time after I think it was about 8 months of him being born. And it was March 21st of 2015, and all over Fox News and CNN was the Islamic State Hacking Division and ISIL, and they'd published 100 people to be killed, and they had our data. And imagine finding out via social media, via phone, via people, being escorted home that day, having your home cleared like it's a narcotics lab, in the middle of the night, and in a good neighborhood in Southern California, and a death threat that was a public outing with your address, your name, all your PII with your picture is out there. And it wasn't because you were one of the 1,000 individuals that had raised your right hand and sworn oath to the nation, like you did, Nick. It wasn't that, but you said in the past, you weren't close to the boots on the ground or the war fighter, but the opposite, the data is what put me in jeopardy, right? All that data that was compromised, the same reason you raised your right hand, the same reason I raised my right hand was the compromise. And it not only put me in risk, but it put my family in risk. I mean, for the next 3 years, we lived with protection. We lived with escalated protection by amazing law enforcement individuals in the area. We moved 4 or 5 times. We lost a fortune in our home. And I realized real quick that it didn't matter what I did, how I did it, that if you don't protect your data, if you don't validate it, if you don't treat it with the utmost respect, and you don't prioritize it, almost like a mission set, right? It can't just be aviation, seaboard operations. It can't just be rotary wing tanks. Data has to be a mission. And I feel like we're starting to cross that plane. I mean, when we started bringing on professionals in industry like yourselves and others in here to start changing the mindset, we were actually, I feel like we started to invest in this industry. And when you see your kids and your wife shaking in the corner because they see someone in the window with weapons and trying to do harm to them, or they don't know what's going to happen, your life changes. The way you look at everything changes. And I went public with this story years ago, and I decided I'll dedicate my life to cyber. And one of the reasons, I mean, diversity in cyber is more than just our ethnicity, our skin color, our race. It's how we think and who we are and why we're doing it. You have to be passionate about it to a point where it's almost uncomfortable to work with each other, because you're that passionate about it. And that's what got me into this community. And eventually going to these big integrators and going to a small startup and building it up, and having the opportunity to be brought into organizations like Microsoft, where you had people that invested in you and said, "Hey, you think differently, right? Let's go out and build this differently." And you made a good point in one of your articles years ago. Why would you hire a pilot who you've never trained for years, right? You don't just stick them in the cockpit and go. You have to train someone. You don't put the next 04, 05 on top of the S6 and say, go build policy, go understand the data models, understand what DevSecOps is and how it integrates with weapon systems. You don't do that unless they know what they're doing. And I think one of the benefits I've had is to see that diversity on their side. I didn't grow up with that model. I didn't learn it. I tried to learn it myself. But now finding those individuals and dragging them in and showing them the mission has been an amazing, amazing journey for me. And I think, I'm going to pause there because I've been doing a lot of talking, Nick, but that's how I got into cyber. And, it's my life's goal to not just protect and defend and do that in a cybersecurity compliance identity sense, but how do we utilize what we're talking about today to actually empower others to do more, right, for the right reasons?
Well, it's a pretty amazing story. I don't think anyone can even comprehend what you had to go through with these threats and what happened to your family and losing all the money with your house. And it must have been a pretty mind altering moment
Yeah.
for you guys. And so I'm very sorry you had to go through that. But you're very right. I think people are getting used to their data being breached. People don't always see the impact of it. Of course, for you, it's a different story because those were leaked in a very specific scenario where lives are at risk. Most people, when they see that data on the dark web or whatever, move on and pretend nothing happened. Everybody ends up getting a bunch of additional coverage or whatever. No real outcomes really come out of that, and people are getting numb to their data being leaked. But that's when you start to realize, wait a minute, this is a real impact here, right? Both on someone's life, finances, kids. I mean, you name it. family.
I mean,
So
imagine,
I think
right?
that's right.
Yeah,
That's a
your
great.
whole world, like turning on your car every morning before you put your kids in it, right? It's a
Mm,
real impact. But I mean, you're absolutely right, and I don't think it's just we dismiss it. I almost think we're starting to turn the corner now, because now you look at things like Ask Sage, and you look at just Chat GPT in general, and what can you do with that influx of trillions of data signals all over the place that got saturated? If someone really wants to find you and everything about you, they could do it now, and a lot faster than they used to be able to.
oh, that's right. That's right. I got a few deaths right myself, and even a couple of people went to my kids' school, with guns. When I left the government. Funny enough, people that thought I was bought by China to say that we were losing against China. But that's people are sometimes a little crazy too. So, but let's talk a little bit about we talk about how you got here, right? We talk
Yeah.
about you as a service member, and really that expertise. I mean, you told us a little bit here what led you to the cyber world, but really when you look back at all the lessons learned, right, realizing data was such a central piece to the kinetic results you were aiming for, and then starting to realize also the impact of data to your life. What does that experience help you achieve as a cyber professional?
I think to extend off of what I shared, Nick, is as a cyber professional, what I didn't do when I started in this role, which I committed to doing, was protecting and committing my life to cyber. But as a cyber professional, what I realized as someone in the national security space and working with weapon systems and mission was you have to put data at the center of everything that you do. And that data centricity, right? Like it's not the platform, right? It's not the technology, it's not the product, it's the data. And as a cyber professional, you have to take, no matter where you are, whether I am here at Microsoft or any one of the amazing cloud service providers or organizations that are in our industry, you have to move that to the side and say, what data am I working with, and what impact can it have to do good and to do harm? And when you take the story I just gave and the perspective I just gave, and you tie it to a very data driven approach and understand the relevance of how that data impacts financial systems, especially, you look at every major bank from Wells Fargo, JP Morgan and Chase and the industry, to the defense organization, everyone from, Sandia Labs, to NASA and all the way into the DoD, all the missions will be different. But as someone from that national security space and as a service member space, you have to take that and you have to take a step back from how we've traditionally looked at these warfare models. And we have to say, hey, to be successful as a security individual or a professional, look at the data. And then to actually go one step further, invest in that data, understand how to manipulate it, understand how to utilize it, how to build with that data, teach yourself how to code. I guess you don't need to anymore with AI and ChatGPT. Teach yourself how to reverse engineer some of that. And then find out how that data is actually impacting revenue, how that data is impacting policy, how that data is impacting, the models that you're utilizing when you introduce it into, things like DevSecOps. So data centric approach is key, and that's really how you achieve whatever you want to do in a security role. And I would also say that it's not just security, it's everything in our industry, security, compliance, right? I mean, I spoke a little bit about who I am and what I did in security, compliance, and identity, but what, I'll share with you what that really means is, the organization that I'm part of, we look at, our platform as something that can't just be cyber, just can't be security, can't just be compliance, can't just be identity. You have all these things entrenched into one. But at the end of the day, no matter what I say, security, compliance, identity, governance, AI, it all rolls back to the data, and you have to be able to map that data to that mission set. And that's what I had as a service member. So I always say, look for those service members or those individuals in the government that understand the mission set. They're able to correlate it back to that data.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think that's a perfect segue, right, to your role, because when you look at the organization you're with as a GM, it's interesting, right, because you have security, compliance, identity management, and privacy. And when you actually try to balance each, often you lead to nothing because it's
Yes.
impossible, and so how do you go back to finding the right balance when it's when it's so difficult, but also what's the foundation of all this stuff, right?
Sure. This is a really good question because it's changed in the last 2 months for me. I used to, you know, discern my time from security and focus on our productivity products and services. As the revenue for the organization changes and as the adoption changes and our strategies change, you kind of shift over into how do we protect and even govern our air gapped environment, our hybrid environments, the infrastructure, right? How do we do that through clouds like Azure? How is that different than things that we like our endpoint protection, like Microsoft Defend for Endpoint or Microsoft Defend for Identity? All of our Defender stack on the productivity side, and then we tie in things like CMMC, right? And then a couple of years ago when we started getting introduced to GDPR and other things, and then you start looking at governance and holding individuals accountable for it. I think for me, where I spend my time is usually where our customers or the individuals that we're working with are spending their time. You cannot just dive into one and say it's good. You need everything at the same time in its own balance. The reason it's changed for me in the last 2 months is, believe it or not, I've been using ChatGPT to understand the basics of what's in the market, what our customers are talking about, where they're talking about it, understanding the basic bullet points between, hey, when they're talking about DevSecOps, what are their priorities? Are they looking at, securing their software supply chain? Are they looking at collecting live telemetry data to monitor their systems? Are they assessing or improving their security posture? What are they doing within that? Like, what part of DevSecOps do we focus on, or do we focus on it as an industry? I think utilizing platforms like Sage or just any GPT powered platform, you have to be able to utilize that data to prioritize your time, understanding that it could be wrong as well, but it's changed. So that I'm starting to try to find ways to infuse machine learning algorithms and AI, generative AI, to kind of learn from what is happening around me and then prioritize my time there. I'll be honest with you though, Nic, like, we are ages behind in where we should be and where we're prioritizing this. I mean, if you look at where the financial industry has been prioritizing security, compliance, identity management, I mean, we spent a lot of time on the compliance side. We spent a lot of time on the multi-cloud, cross-cloud side, how to govern it, right? We're still talking about zero trust in other parts of the industry, like the DoD, and how to implement it, right? And when to implement it. So that's a lot of zero, and we're doing a great job of kind of starting to move the ball forward there. But a lot of that conversation revolves in security for us, and rather than maybe privacy or maybe in other industries where we're starting to talk about ransomware or other or management, to kind of manage all of that, right? And we're still trying to figure out how to manage it in these enterprise organizations that are thousands to a million seats, to see, hey, which one of these to prioritize. So I think utilizing AI and kind of mixing both is starting to change the mold of how I prioritize what I do. But at the end of the day, we have to listen to the people and what they want to do, and utilizing these services and technologies to do that is kind of the shift that I'm moving into.
Yeah, we'll talk about AI, also later on when it comes to the integration of generative AI into pretty much every Microsoft product you can think about, which is exactly the way to go. You look at Teams, you look at cyber, with Sentinel and Microsoft Defender. I mean, everything is going to be leveraging generative AI and other AI
Right.
technologies to start augmenting it, right? To become more and more able to automate tasks and predict and see, outcomes and categorize and detect, maybe some type of anomaly or behavior. So it's gonna be interesting to see how the market is going to evolve. I think it's going to be a completely different world in a couple of years. But when you look back, right, I think what's interesting that you said, right, is you're not stuck in time. A lot of people are like me. We're all opinionated. We think we know everything, right? And then life, teaches you that things evolve, and you may not have been completely wrong back then, but maybe things change enough to reassess where you want to focus. And that's kind of what I've done my whole life, really. Building innovations, and sometimes you're too early, sometimes you're too late, sometimes you're right on time, right? That is going to define the multiple you're going to get for your exit for your company. But you know when you look at kind of where we headed, right? And you know people saying, AI is the future of cybersecurity. I heard the same thing with blockchain, right? And blockchain is great and brings this lot of great value in many different use cases. But the fact is, people claim it would be the foundation of everything moving forward, including voting and whatnot. Integration, integrity, and the ability of validating data and protecting it, and checking signatures and things exists without blockchain. And so while it does bring some additional value with the blockchain itself, you can achieve very similar cyber outcomes without it. And so what we've seen so far is blockchain adoption being very minimal at all, outside of most of the currency, cryptocurrency companies. But if you look at it, and so some people say AI is just a buzzword, or it's just going to fade away. What do you think? Do you think AI is really going to become that foundation future of cyber? Is that true, or what is that going to bring to us?
Man, I'm going to get pushed off a ledge for saying this, but I think I believe in it. I, I believe everyone is adding AI to everything that they're doing. Uh, and not all of it is AI. If you look at the industry in general, we've been doing, data centric machine learning models for years. And we've been utilizing these models to make better decisions, to achieve our missions, to integrate in the weapon systems. And I feel that AI is real, artificial intelligence is real, but I also feel like we use it as a crutch to say that is innovative. That is something we're going to do. And I mean, there's a great example of this. When we talk about AI at Microsoft, I love some of the things we're doing. We could touch on it if you'd like later, but infusing AI and machine learning into all of our products and services. And that's to do things better, right? To you hit the nail on the head when we first started, to reduce your task load, to make things easier as you're moving forward, to get time back. Uh, and that's what I use
Yeah,
it.
augmenting humans, right? That's
Augment, yeah,
really, people
yeah,
are afraid about their jobs, right? So a lot of people, I'm a little bit upset with people. So many people, and the press is kind of feeding this because of their incompetence and ability to do anything that's not negative in this world. The press is always focused on the downside of GPT and generative AI and AI.
right.
They always talk about the 5% issues, which are real, which by the way will improve and get better over time. And they're so focused on the downside, and so few articles talking about the progress and the lives that they could save and all the things we could do. And they're
I mean,
not covering that.
yeah. I mean, think
Why
about
do you
this,
think
right?
that is? Do you think people are afraid of the change? Do you think people
Oh,
are, they put their head in
100%.
the sand and hope for the best? What's the
I mean,
deal?
let's have a honest conversation, right? You develop a malicious PowerShell script, right? And then you spend the whole day trying to reverse that thing to find out where it's coming from, right?
Right.
And now, like, infuse AI or machine learning algorithm models into that and be able to do it like
In a
that,
second.
right? And for someone like me, Nick, who doesn't have like the STEAM background that so many of my peers and the folks that are in our industry and even on my teams have, that I respect, these types of tools get me to a spot where I can look at that, I can assess it, and I can look at how does that better affect our security operations. Now, can I bring different types of individuals here to do this job that maybe didn't have that training in the past, that can actually see it? Now, there's some bad there too.
It expands people's potential, right? And they
Oh,
can achieve stuff they wouldn't be able to do. It's like a
3.4
it's like
million
a
jobs.
superhuman. It's like a superhuman, right?
I mean, it's and then you start tying in quantum, which we didn't even plan on talking about, right? And years ago, like, how do you start solving some of
We
those
have a
issues?
question about quantum at the end, so there's already someone that asked a question about quantum. So
So
you have to answer it. So, but at the end, at the end.
I might plead the fifth on that, but no, it's fine. Well, but with that being said, I think the last report I read was 3.4 million jobs. Now, where you said, hey, is AI? You asked, is AI the future of cybersecurity? It's not the future. It's the baseline, right? The machine learning algorithms, what we're doing, it's a given. It's kind of
Human can't keep up anyways, right? It's
remember
not
when we said
it's not possible
zero
to keep up.
trust, zero trust and passwordless? Is that the future of cybersecurity? Is identity the future of cybersecurity? And what does it become? It's become the intrinsic baseline of what we're doing. Now, I will say that we look at this is the one topic I wanted to really bring up on this call and on this conversation with you, is most of us here on this call are in the cloud space or in the IT space. We look at data as something that we value, and then we plug it into these models. And when we look at AI, we look at how do we automate a threat hunter? How do we automate our platform? How do we automate our products? How do we make this thing easier? Now I want you to think of AI in its glorious use cases of industry. How do you spend millions of dollars making a song in a recording room, and you utilize AI and those models to generate, the same voice, the same video, maybe in a movie. You redo the scene, you put it in a different language, you change the dialect. We're talking about deep fake, right? Now, the advances in AI, when it comes to industry, like cinema and like the music industry and certain aspects of maybe the retail industry, where it comes to commercials and enterprise marketing and things of that nature, it goes a long way to save on the operating cost of organizations. I mean, we've all seen this year, the economy and everyone's shaping for a recession, and organizations kind of scaling down almost 40% per organization. So really reducing their operating costs. They're going to be utilizing things like AI solutions to maintain that revenue stream, to automate a lot of what they're doing, to change the way they're doing things, and to be able to do more with that. So just as we're doing in the security industry, they're going to do it to make movies. They're going to do it to make music. They're going to do it to do other things. Now, when I look at what the future of cybersecurity is, it's not just utilizing AI to solve for the basic ways to do threat hunting and run a security operations center, but how are things like that industry is doing? Like, what's a true next generation SOC going to look like? Is it going to be a person utilizing AI, or is it going to be run by some machine learning algorithm that's infused by maybe just one person just managing it, like a train conductor? I think that is the future of what AI is going to do to our industry. It's going to automate it so that we're not going to fill people to do more, but we're going to be utilizing it and being dependent on it more and more, because it's going to allow us to do more and more and more that we didn't even think of. Not just reverse lab a malicious PowerShell script, right? But it's going to allow us to talk to someone that truly doesn't exist, right? In real life, like you and me. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you could do an in the nick of time with Vishal, and this could totally be an AI model. This could be a total deep fake. And what
Maybe
is
soon
that?
I won't have to do the show. Someone else, Sage, is gonna come to it for me.
Well,
That'll be
what
fun.
happens? What happens if I could start authenticating like this, right? I mean, when we start replicating sensories, right? Facial recognition, things of that nature. I mean, for me, that's scary, but that's also, you have to look at the positives, you have to look at the negatives, but that's the future. And
You
if
can't just look at the negative. That's the issue with people. They just dismiss all the. Look, I get it. We're already, killing jobs, right? A lot of reduction of jobs. On top of that, AI is going to take away jobs. People compare with the automotive industry. The automation we've seen with all the automotive robots. But the fact is, people miss one thing. Robots in the automotive industry are very expensive. GPT costs $30. So
sure,
that's going to make the barrier to entry much lower, which means the disruption is going to be a million times more impactful on jobs than we think it's going to be.
I love how you
And we
brought
can,
that up.
by the way, we can pretend it's not going to happen and make people feel better. But the fact is, where people do you think should reinvent themselves to, right? If you said a lot of these
Yes.
jobs will be automated and replaced by AI, which will be the case, just like many jobs disappeared with
Mhm.
automation in many industries, what do you think people should learn, or what's the skill?
Uh,
Prompt engineering is a great step, right? So you be to become the guy orchestrating the
under
bot, but what else?
understand algorithms and how they operate. I think that's key. One of the key things that one of the great things that I spoke about last week was the fact that, I mean, you made a great point with automotive industry. This is a great example. We solve supply chain in the automotive industry with essentially an algorithm, right? To secure their physical processes, to automate much of what they do, and to get it out faster. I mean, it was automation that was able to do that. And I think in the future, if you can understand algorithms, but then understand how to be data centric instead of product, service or algorithm centric, that is going to leverage future growth. And I think that's what people need to invest in is pick the industry and then say, all right, what algorithms can I start investing in developing? Because the algorithm will always do what the algorithm needs to do. But if the data is corrupt, if the data is different, if the data is, that's when the issues are going to happen, right? It's whenever you see something bad happen, it's always you know a breach of data. It's a spillage of this, a spillage of that, or excuse me, or they said, hey, this AI, did XYZ or train derailments or any of these physical things. Listen, the algorithms usually done what they've been designed to do. But if they're pulling from data sets that have, false positives in there, that have things that aren't validated, that's when bad things happen. So if you're going to invest in the future, if you're going to invest in where we're going to go, invest in AI, as in understand the algorithms behind it, understand how those algorithms are going to be 100x to the right, utilizing things like quantum, utilizing things like AI, and utilize some of the existing technologies now like Ask Sage and ChatGPT to kind of help you get there faster.
What's interesting is that every time there's a new advancement in technology, right, bad actors are going to use it, which means, good actors like us have to come up with ways to use technology to do good and kind of stop the malicious activities, which means, creating more jobs in figuring out how to use it to solve the problems that the new technology is creating. So it's a, compounding, never ending, exponential set of work that is created by the new technology, and people always dismiss that. It's just like the internet, right? People were like, oh, it's going to disrupt all these jobs. Sure, but it created all these other jobs that didn't exist before, so now we can do that. But I think, back to Joel's point, he said, people need to continuously evolve and learn. That's very true, particularly in IT. A lot of people are used to sticking and learning something and get a job for 50 years. those times are over, right? If you don't reinvent yourself,
100%.
I would argue every year you're out of the picture, right?
I learned something really, really important from a a mentor of mine here, and she's at Microsoft, and she's amazing. And I said, when I told her I did not have the experience to come here years ago to Microsoft, and be in a role that required 10, 15 years of experience, she said, Vishal, if we hire the engineer, the architect that built our services and our products, that lived in the skiff, that did all of this, and they knew the ins, they knew the outs, they knew everything about it, they would already know how to solve the problem I'm asking in their own way. But if we don't hire someone else, maybe someone that doesn't know anything about cybersecurity, but knows everything about, supply chain, maybe someone that doesn't know anything about compliance, right, but knows everything about adoption to the cloud and IaaS and moving to a major cloud provider, maybe doesn't know anything about X and knows everything about Y, then we're looking at the problem differently. And it takes someone different to solve the world's largest challenges. You have to shake it up. You can't just have the 25-year in the service lieutenant colonel running all of J6 for all of the service. And I think we've started to make great steps in that direction. And if they don't have the ability to, at minimum, we need to start utilizing these types of things to infuse the education into those individuals to start learning things faster and faster and faster. And that's what she shared with me. Bring people different to solve the biggest issues. And we talked about, mentioned China and other things earlier. We have to know what's happening bad too. Because guess what? If we turn a blind eye to it, they're already doing it. I look at all the weapon systems that we worked with in the Hornet, and every day we used to go in the briefing room, right? And we used to bring out the list of all the weapon systems, all the surface to air missiles that we're out to look out for, and maybe plug our weapon systems against to see what the weapon engagement zone was. And then we look at the Chinese variants, right? We look at the foreign variants, right? And they looked exactly the same. Right?
I wonder how. What
right?
happened? What happened? I don't know.
They looked exactly the same, right? They just had a different name to it. So if we think that we could just turn a blind eye and innovate and not know that, hey, there's a backdoor into this, there's a vulnerability.
And getting free R&D, that's good.
That's it. And we have to acknowledge that, right?
We spend trillions and they spend millions. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. So yeah, again, we deviate from this point, but this has been a great topic. Yeah, I think AI is the future, but we have to invest in what we're doing there, not AI in general, right?
So you mentioned, RSA, right? Yes. I don't go anymore because it's crazy, and I think there's a lot of sales pitch continuously, never ending over there. But it's always interesting to get people like you to go, so you can tell me what happened. So
happy to be your guinea pig.
So what have you seen there that's exciting, and not just the usual bullshit that people come up with, but really what other trends is. I know everybody updated their deck, adding AI somewhere just to pretend they're doing something. So what is happening?
It's true. I mean, you go there and you go to the vendor floor, and it's interesting to see. I'll start with this. I hadn't been to RSA ever, and I went last year for the first time, and this year I brought some folks that had never been to RSA that weren't security people, and we said just go to the vendor floor and go land there. And I think a lot of our teams at Microsoft, they have this list of the 1,000 different security vendors that you could displace utilizing the Microsoft 365 and Azure platform. And sure, right, we're all in each other's space and all of that. And I said, if you look at the map of the vendor floor at RSA, it looks like that slide that we constantly, have some of our teams are putting out. And it's interesting because there's a lot, but I said, now go in there with a different lens. I said, I want you to go in there, and every vendor you go see, I want you to ask what they're building on and where they're headed. What's their end state? And you realize that just as much as all of the security, compliance, all the folks compete, Nic, they partner. And the one thing, the trend that I saw, I think a lot of folks maybe saw a trend this year in cloud security a little bit, right? GRC was a big thing. IAM was right there as well. Surprisingly, there weren't too many questions or things around quantum, but I think because of where it's been forecasted to be projected out, a lot of the organizations that are selling to and trying to partner with, they're not talking about it as much on the floor there. But I saw AI on the back of everything, but what I did see though was it wasn't AI, right? It was more machine learning, like the shoring up the algorithms. There was a lot more move to the cloud with our current technologies. I mean, there wasn't anything groundbreaking on the floor that I saw. The one thing that was very surprising, that was really worth seeing, was the change in the acquisition market of security. Who was buying what technologies were traditionally on the table, what organizations were probably the hottest, and which ones maybe weren't. And I saw a lot of early stage venture capitalist organizations out there. I saw the big ones out there that were making really great moves and investments, like Forge Point Capital was out there, right? Crosspoint Capital, a couple of the others. And I saw, even though AI was a thing and everyone was kind of talking about it, the biggest conversation point I saw was cross cloud and multi-cloud. Realizing that organizations went to a single cloud approach, single vendor approach last year, minimizing cost after COVID. But now taking a step back and saying, hey, as these major cloud security providers or cloud providers provide their solutions, are they providing it just for their organizations, or are they truly opening it up and making it cross cloud? And you saw the rise of organizations like like Upticks and Wiz that were out there that were just, hey, how are we managing this cross cloud environment? Everything, not just AWS and Google, but AWS, Google, Oracle, right? All of it. How are we doing both cloud security, posture management, and cloud workload posture management? Is Microsoft already doing it? And there was two inherent tracks. There was secure through my platform or secure on my platform, right? And I think that's what I saw. Was you saw most organizations say, listen, we do everything everyone else does, but how do we attach ourselves to maybe an enterprise cloud where we can start utilizing that shared responsibility model to alleviate all the ancillary tasks, right? So that we can stay compliant by default and be secure by default as we're developing in these clouds, right? And developing our products there, and then hosting that on Azure, right? For example, rather than just using Azure as a default. And I think we've seen this in the DoD, where I think we've made a mistake over the last many years, and I'm talking about myself, right? Is looking at it and saying, we have to go to this platform, we have to go to this product, we have to use, XYZ, instead of saying, hey, let's raise the tide so all the ships rise, right? Like, let's build a secure cloud. Let's make everything secure by default, right? It doesn't have. Listen, if you want to invest in Palo Alto Networks, right? Guess what? Microsoft has virtual firewalls. But if you have that investment there and you're doing things there, then how do we partner together? And that was the difference. I've never seen partnering to that level than this year at RSA. Usually it's been a bloodbath, right? Of just, I do this, you do that. But this year it was, what is Google doing? What is Amazon Web Services doing? What is Microsoft doing? How are we at Microsoft empowering every single one of these individuals on the floor to do more so that they can take advantage of our AI models? How we're infusing things like Copilot into our products. And that was the difference. That's what I saw. And from the investment organizations, it was more so who's eating who and who's investing in who. And that's where I saw organizations like Wiz and Upticks, for example, which, no affiliation to, but it was, hey, we get it, Microsoft, we get it, AWS, but we are revolutionizing cross-cloud and multi-cloud in the banking industry, right? So let's do it for defense. Let's do it for healthcare, right? And I think that's probably as product-centric as I got. there. Outside of that, it's always a great reunion of folks, right? Well, I'm gonna convince you and drag you out there next year. So,
All right, I'll go with you.
so
So I have quite a few questions, and I want to make sure we ask it. So we're gonna try to shorter your answer a little bit. So when it comes to data centricity, right? A lot of people are asking on the chat, what is it? How do we enable data security down to the cell level? What's your take on this?
um, we covered. I'll shorten my answer. We've covered a lot of this, right? Kind of in the conversation in the last hour. You have to move outside of the product and the platform, and you have to use the actual data. And I think that's where we're moving. I think a lot. I think I mentioned this last week, maybe when we were talking, was people were, last year it was all about maybe the product and the endpoints and things of that nature. And this year it's moved past that, and it's gone straight to the user data. Really, really, really having a good model of data and a good honest model of data that you can utilize to actually build from, which was really something different, right? When you talk about data centricity, I think you talk about a couple of aspects. It's your data, number one, right? It's no one else's data. So when you look at things like data centricity and you enable security down to that level, are you utilizing that data to feed into generative AI, or is it your data, right? Are you protecting it in that facet? So when you do look at data being the pillar and the key to everything you're doing and going a little deeper, think of it in that sense, right? Think of it as something that's core to you. When we build these AI models out and they're utilizing your data, who owns all of that later, right? Where does that come from, right? But it all starts with what data was plugged in, where did it come from? Is it accurate? Is it something that you're utilizing to build your applications? Is it something that you're utilizing as a query, maybe on the SecOps floor, right? That data is very raw, and we have to focus on that rather than how the platform is going to protect the data, right? You have to understand where it originates from. And I think when you look at data centricity, that's the core of it. Very simply.
Awesome. So you talk about multi-cloud, right? At the platform level, how do you enable that for real? Because it's a gimmick now, but how do you actually get it done?
Yeah. So we cover some of this. I think we have to get off of we have to take a step back, and we have to accept the fact that every single one of our customers and people are utilizing multiple platforms. So we can't bring them all onto one platform. Even though, it may save them a lot of money, it may save a lot of cost, but we have to accept the fact that we have S3 buckets to protect. We have, we have to leverage the use of hot and cold storage to save money, right? And we have to start utilizing cloud native SIEM solutions, for example, to do our SecOps. And when you think about multi-cloud, right, I think the last thing someone wants to do is to be able to manage and administratively manage all the data and all the applications in every single cloud that they have. So when I look at multi-cloud, that really is the cloud security posture management, the cloud workload posture management all in one. And we have to start investing in organizations, and our organization has to start actually investing in others that are already doing it, right? That are adopting multi-cloud efforts. So everything from servers, KQL, everything, right? Everything is there. It can't just be the productivity side. I think we focus a lot on Microsoft 365 from my standpoint. I think when people see, well, how does Microsoft look at security? Well, we start with identity, and we say, hey, verify explicitly, right? When we look at zero trust, we say, hey, utilize Azure Active Directory P2. Utilize that as the front end. Make sure that you have conditional access set up, right, for everything, from your servers, everything. And then when you're utilizing things like our CASB, or when you're looking at things like our endpoint protection, again, we're looking at the productivity suite. We're not truly looking at multi-cloud. We have to shift the focus out into the shared responsibility model of IaaS, right, and then really go go look at products like what we have, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We have to go look at, I mentioned Wiz and Upticks earlier, when we're actually doing the cloud workload posture management. We can go plug in all of your compliance frameworks into those and validate off of those, right? And be able to build all of that into one place. And I think that's what a true multi-cloud capability is from a platform level. You have to be able to enable it on Azure or through Azure or through an organization, like a Wiz or Upticks that can do it all. So from a platform level, I think we have to support it. And that goes to my point earlier of building on Azure versus through Azure. I think we could do it in both. It's where do you feel comfortable, right? If you talk to half of our business, they're going to share with you the benefits of doing it through our capabilities, like Microsoft Defender for Cloud. They're amazing. I love it. They're awesome. But we also have a whole partner organization, and we have folks that are already doing it, right? And at the end of the day, I look at, when we talk about multi-cloud capability from a platform level, Nick, I think a question I got a couple years ago is, Vishal, as you're leading the security business now in certain facets, is Microsoft a security company, or are you a cloud company? And when we talk when I talk multi-cloud, and when we talk how do we support multi-cloud, I think of us as a cloud company, right? Not just a security company, because everyone does security. It's almost like you have to have it done by default. So when we talk about enabling a true multi-cloud capability, I would say, start with a great foundational platform, and then anything that you adopt on top of that, make sure that you can feed it into a place where you can actionably, set all your compliance for frameworks, NIST, all of it, right? Anything from the DoD side, from the federal civilian side, on the financial side, you can put it all in one place, maybe run, a workbook off of it to be able to validate and give to the auditors, but make sure that you can make sure it's open so that you can put everything into it. And I think that's a different direction we took at Microsoft last year, or 2 years ago, is, hey, this isn't, morally, you can't just protect the Microsoft cloud. You have to open it up to everyone else. And when you look at when Microsoft Defender for Cloud last year went GA, with being able to bring in Google, bringing in Amazon, and working, we had to work together with our cloud service providers to do that. And that's truly what we should be looking for when you talk to the individuals that you work with at organizations like mine on how to enable true multi-cloud capability.
No doubt. So now the hard question for you. I have a couple more before we take a couple of questions from the public. How well do you think the Department of Defense is doing in technology adoption, specifically compared to what the CCP is doing?
Oh, that was a hard question. Man, you just put me on the spot.
That's what I do.
Oh, I mean, the no crud answer. I think we cannot dismiss the advancements that the CCP has and folks on the East have. One of the clear delineations I saw at RSA that I didn't mention, that you just brought up by proxy, was there's a clear balance of organizations that had to align with the West and align to the right. And when you look at the production of chips, for example,
yep,
right? How do you align with one side or the other when your entire supply chain and all the innovations are happening on the other side?
Right. We made it happen. We gave them the keys to the kingdom.
So when we talk about, are we making advancements? Listen, we're making amazing advancements. I mean, everyone here has heard my story. If what we had today was available when that happened, my life would have been a lot easier to be able to live, to be able to navigate, to be able to do different things. We've come longer and further in the last 6 years than I think we could have ever. But it's that competition that's kept us going. It's that fear of being outperformed.
Are we complacent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what makes us complacent is our ability to procure and our ability to deploy and all of the governance behind it. The moment we know something is good, I think we have to find better ways to get those adoptions done faster, right? I mean, I think we've tried with AppWorks and AppWorks and a lot of the software factories, right, in the DoD, and trying to be innovative, but we have to be able to do it at an enterprise scale. And I think we need to start seeing, and we should start seeing, our government leaders start changing the policies for us to do that. I think, unfortunately, Nick, the individuals that are shaping our policy around artificial intelligence, around cybersecurity, are individuals that maybe are like me, that weren't in this industry for 20 years, right? But they're in positions to shape the budget and policies there. So, you know what? If you're going to ask me what's holding us back, honestly, it's our policies and our ability to move. Because on the private sector side, in the financial side, on the healthcare side, we're innovating like no one else, right? And even on the DoD side, we are innovating like no one else when we're putting warfighters out there and utilizing technologies and techniques and procedures that no one else in the world is utilizing. But there's a sleeping giant on the other side. You know, their surface to air missiles look the same and sound the same as ours. They've got, factories and factories producing chips for all the phones that we have and that I have, and everything in my home. Like, they're innovating as fast, if not faster, than we are. And I mean, I think hopefully that answer is suffice, right? That's everyone from the CCP to us. We have a lot of work to do, but I think it takes these types of conversations that we're having and innovative people to disrupt and say, hey, we are doing it wrong. Let's do it right. And then it takes the same people on the inside, because as well as I do, people like us, they exist on the inside. They're there. And some of them will get frustrated and they'll come into private sector and try to make the difference that way. And some of them will go into finance, but they are there. We have to be able to empower them and enable them, even if it's not our job. And that's kind of one of my goals is, how do you empower and enable the warfighter? I mean, I don't serve anymore, right? I'm sitting here with a collared shirt on instead of a flight suit and a pair of camouflage fatigues on. But those folks are out there doing it every day. How do you empower them to encourage them to stay in? And getting out to the private sector, having a fruitful financial career and things of that nature, incent them to come out. But we have to be able to empower them to stay in positions longer, and with more information to be able to make the change. And I think with the innovations that we've seen just in the last year, last couple of months alone, is encouraging.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So we talk about what's next and what's the next big thing. Is that already, AI for you? What else is big? One thing, not 20. What's the big one?
All right. I think the next big thing is a human-centric approach to security. I think we moved away from it. I think because we're getting more data-centric and because we're relying on algorithms instead of data, that we're not validating a lot of the things that we're doing. And I think we're almost going to revert back to a human-centric approach. And it's going to be based off of more compliance frameworks. It's going to be based off of more governance. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to put more people to do that. But to do that, you have to understand the algorithms. You have to understand the data-centric approach. I think there's going to be more people thrown at this problem. And that's the next big thing. I don't think it's a technology. I don't think it's a cloud service. I think we're making plenty of innovations and advances there, with, especially in the government, with cloud and IL6, IL7, things of that nature. But the next big thing is, I think we're going to see a rise in people validating the work that we're doing in AI, and maybe that's compliance, maybe that's governance, right? But it's going to be physical people, not just the processes or the technology.
There we go. All right. I had to ask you that question too, right? How do you see technology like GPT specifically bring value to your customers?
I don't think they need us anymore, right? They've got Ask Sage, they've got ChatGPT. I mean, I could go on there today and could have just, asked Sage all my answers. I think a lot of what we do there is there. Listen, it allows them to get the answers they need now, faster, so that we can prioritize our conversations on the most important things. I think we have to be able to utilize that. And if you are going to do it, right, attach it to the power of the cloud. right? Attach it to the power of Azure so that you could do it at scale and you're not developing in a silo, developing in a basement somewhere on your own, unvalidated. And if you start utilizing things like Ask Sage, GPT, you can do some of that self-validation before you bring the humans back in to actually help you kind of get you that last mile.
There we go. What keeps you up at night?
Besides the terrorist?
Yeah. Do they still keep you up at night? Do they still keep you up at night?
Sometimes I used to get a letter every couple of weeks from the DOJ. Every time your data gets associated with someone that's actually committed the crime or has utilized it for malicious intent, the DOJ sends you. I mean, the DOJ sends you letters on it of what happened to that person, if they got paroled or not. So that actually used to keep me up at night. Now I get them about once a quarter, still, but I've come to a better place after that. I think what keeps me up at night outside of things like that are probably things like quantum. Quantum computing is something that's going to change the game of how we do everything. And if you look at compliance, if you look at quantum, you look at security 5 or 6 years ago when we're moving into the cloud, these are investments that we didn't make because the private sector did not see revenue implications or ROI on the back of them. So when I look at things like quantum, when I look at things like compliance, and then I look at markets like retail, and I look at markets like financial or healthcare, I think, or not healthcare, but maybe enterprise, how our organization is going to make money and their shareholders are going to be happy later if they're not going to see the near-term ROI off of these technologies. How are we investing in future technologies and higher classification of clouds and other things? That's something that I constantly think about. I think we're doing some innovative things. I'm going to plug Microsoft in here right now. Right, is at Microsoft, right? For example, they started developing, their IL6, IL7 infrastructure well before our customers even had the ability to adopt it. And I think we need to see that moving forward. Because if organizations in the private sector are not implementing things early and getting ahead of the curve, we're going to be in a place where we're retroactively fixing everything, right? I think of all the digital signatures I've made in the last 10 years. Then when quantum comes out, right? I mean, am I going to have to re-sign everything? Is someone else going to own my house all of a sudden? Like, what's going to happen? And that's what kind of keeps me up at night.
Yeah, that's a good one, no doubt. All right, let's take some questions. We have 15 minutes left for a few questions.
Right.
Let's see this one.
Is there a question bank, or do we see it? Oh, there we go.
Bank. I'll bring it up on the screen so you don't have to worry about it. What are your thoughts on the current effort with the national cybersecurity strategy to force DoD national security requirements into American civil society as well?
So, I mean, I think and Patrick, that's a good question. I think I'm going to loop in all of the cybersecurity efforts that we've kind of come out recently, everything from everything that President Biden's put out in the presidential orders to even the current piece that Randy Resnick and his team and the Honorable Sherman have been working on with the DoD Zero Trust initiative. Our national cybersecurity strategy, I think, is finally, with some good leadership, has been moving in the right direction. I still think, like, for example, if you look at the Zero Trust directive and the 152 activities behind it, they're not focused on just an outcome and meeting the intent. There's something they're not just to meet an intent or to build a product or to buy something and say, hey, check in the box. They're outcome driven. So they have to be reassessed over time. And I think we're starting to change the fundamental way of how we think of cybersecurity and how we assess it against what we're already doing. I think the effort is good. I think there's a lot of work to be done. I'm crossing my fingers on, I know we're in the 45-day period on the DoD side for the POM cycle right now, where all the planning is happening. I'm crossing my fingers that that budget allocated next year shows that investment that they're making and all the policies and the regulations that have come out in the last 2 years. I don't think we've seen it as much in the last 2 years as we needed, but now with the consolidation,
it's paperweight right now, right? Compared to,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
always good to have the paper, but if you don't have the outcomes,
Well, Nick, I mean, I'll tell you, right? Like, I mean, from the Air Force side, you could be directed to do something, but who's funding it, and where's that money coming from, right? And if you have other priorities to build, then are you going to prioritize the zero trust efforts if you're already meeting your own zero trust intent? But if someone else is funding it, right? Like, I mean, I look at what CISA is doing and their initiative, right, around the endpoint and what they did to fund that for their organizations is brilliant. It was brilliant, right? And I applaud CISA and the Honorable Krebs, our first director, and now Jen, who's kind of doing that as well across, both doing amazing job. I mean, defending our country is a hard task, but to enable others to defend it in their own way, I mean, that's what they did. So I think we have to do more of that. And I'm hoping that translates over into the DoD side.
Yeah, Jen has done a great job for sure. So how do you deal with the growing lack of accountability that AI algorithm and even humans who use the follow the data slogan are used to abdicate responsibility?
I think AI and our ML models have to be able to discern things like malware. I think that's one thing that we have to get to. The get repo code validation, we have to use that for that too. But at the big premise of all of that, I mean, those are the big things that come to my mind. But the biggest thing is we have to come to a place where the AI, I think, has to start recognizing bias, right? I think if AI can get to a place where it can recognize bias, maybe
the issue is how we define bias, right? If you ask the left and the right, I think it's going to be a pretty different definition.
Right, and I'm not saying bias as a negative way, right, Nick? I'm saying we have to be able to differentiate it, right? We have to be able to differentiate what the left is, what the right is, ethnicities, race, everything. Like, we have to be able to get to a point where it's not just data in, data out, building out algorithms on top of that, but being able to say, where is it actually coming from? What's the political demographic of the environment that's coming? Where's almost Skynet, right? Like, you're getting really the mind share of who that person is. And it is scary. It is absolutely scary. I mean, I know there's
people
things
always good to blame somebody else anyways, right? So in our she also mentioned humans who use a follow the data slogan and then don't take responsibility. I mean, we've seen many decisions. Look at the exit of of Afghanistan, right? You would think the chairman of Joint Staff will resign the next day, but he didn't, and he's not,
Yeah, and I've
no impact on his career. That's pretty scary. That's disappointing for the warfighter that sacrificed their lives there. And he would argue allegedly follow the data, right? But I would.
What a great example! I mean, I didn't even think of that in this context. What a great example, right? I mean, yeah, you have to. You could follow data, but I think you have to get on the
still make the decision, right? You're still the one saying, let's do this or not. So I guess our question is really about, like, does following the data give you a pass on being responsible for your decision?
No. No, it absolutely does not, right? Data is as good as what you put in, and it's as good as how you articulate it. And I think we have to have.
Well, the good news is it won't be difficult to get a better chairman of the Joint Staff for the next one. So, all right, next question. How do you contrast and integrate cybersecurity and cyber operations defensive to enhance performance and effects? That's a tough one.
Cybersecurity and cyber operations. So we're talking about defensive cybersecurity and defensive cyber operations to enhance performance and effects. It is a tough one, but I'm a Marine, so I like to keep things simple. When we talk about defensive cyber operations, I think it's important to note that we are always on the defensive. We're never going to be able to climb out of it. When I look at when I integrate cybersecurity as a whole, as an industry, I look at it as integrating it within everything that we're doing, not buying a product, not just deploying an endpoint solution. Those are things that are total two different pieces, right? To be able to have the most punch from your cyber operations, I think you have to be able to utilize the power of innovative technologies in the cloud. And that's just my personal opinion. At Microsoft, we see over 65 trillion threat signals a day. Being able to infuse something like that into your cyber defensive operations and being able to put your own models on top of that and integrating that into your defenses is a game changer, right? But then that's totally different than being able to integrate those same tools and those same telemetries into maybe an endpoint product, maybe something, maybe your multi-cloud solution, maybe whether it be Microsoft Defender for Cloud or something else, or your identity solution, right? That's product focus where maybe you're protecting the end user. And then I think you have to also differentiate nation state versus malicious intent as well, right? Of where everyone else comes from. I don't have a great answer here, but I will say that we have to infuse those trillions of signals into defensive operations to give us a leg to stand on, right? No longer, we don't have enough people to do what we do there anymore.
So the last question I think is for me, but then I'll let you do the parting words and thank everybody. And I'll let people know also before that who the next guest is.
Oh, I'm excited too.
So Devon was asking how, if at all, is the implementation use of AI being standardized within the DoD? The answer is the new DoD office, the Chief Digital AI Office came out, actually based on my recommendation when I left the department, created by DevSecDef, reporting to DevSecDef, and Craig Martell, the great DoD CDAO, is leading that, and brought in Advana and DDS and Tradewinds and all the cool stuff and Jake, of course, the Joint AI Center into the CDAO, and so they are the team responsible for this. And in fact, Sage is working with the CDAO to create the first DoD-wide ATO for an AI product like Sage for the department. So that's interesting. A lot of ethics, maybe too many discussions about ethics. Honestly, I'm all about ethics, but I'm also about outcomes for the warfighter. So I would hope that we spend less money on discussing ethics while China is spending money on actual tangible outcomes. So with that, the next guest next Tuesday is Terry joining us, and you'll see the announcement on the show today. The CEO of Fleet Defender. And we'll be talking about cyber warfare and the offensive side a little bit more. And we've not done that on the show, so it's going to be interesting to see a little bit of more insight, although a lot of it is classified, so we have to be careful. But getting people here in the audience a little bit of a sneak peek into cyber offense. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Next Tuesday, 1 p.m. And with that, I wanted to thank you. This has been an awesome episode. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you're doing still now for the nation. Thank you for spending the time with us. It's been an incredible hour and a half with you. Wanted to give you the floor for the parting words.
Sure, I'll leave everyone with this. There's a gentleman who gave his life to our country. His name is Travis May, and I get to spend some time with his family later this week. And he was shot by a sniper, and on his second deployment. On his first deployment, he said 5 words to his brother-in-law, who said, "Hey, if you get hurt, maybe you don't have to go." And he said, "Listen, if I don't go, someone less willing, less able will have to." And that following deployment, he gave his life. I live my life by those 5 words as well, especially in our industry now. I think every single one of us has a superpower, and no matter who you are, no matter what you do, know that you can make a difference. And if you don't invest in it, someone less willing, someone less able will have to. So, I challenge everyone here today to ask yourself those 5 words next time you're in the office, next time you're at work, next time you're at home. If not me, then who? Awesome. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Awesome. Again, thanks so much. And everybody, see you next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, let's make sure our kids have a fighting chance at winning against China 20 years from now. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.